Good morning. Thank you for joining us for today's Bible reading. This weekend, this Sunday, we'll be finishing off our series, I See in You, all about God seeing in us something that we may not see ourselves and calling us and using us to do extraordinary things for his kingdom in this world. And it's my sincere hope and prayer that through this series, you've seen that God has created you, that God sees something in you for you to do work for his kingdom in this world. I pray that you've seen that, you've experienced that through this series. We'll be finishing off with the story of Esther this Sunday in service. Let's take a little bit look at her story in Esther chapter 4. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, "All the king's officials and all the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the golden scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king." When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's royal house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." If you didn't see yesterday's video, if you don't know that much about Esther's story, here's a quick recap. Esther, she's a Jewish woman, and she basically wins a contest and becomes the new queen in the kingdom of Persia. And there's a plot by a wicked guy named Haman to destroy all the Jews throughout the kingdom of Persia. And Esther's in this position to save everybody, or at least to approach the king and have a conversation, but that could come at a great cost. It could cost her life. And so she talks to her uncle Mordecai, and her uncle Mordecai has this great phrase, one of my favorite quotes in all the Bible. He says, "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" For such a time as this. That should encourage each and every one of us. Looking at our world, looking at our lives, looking at everything we've got going on, who knows that God has placed you, has placed me, has placed us in this exact moment, in your neighborhood, in your place of employment, in your family, for such a time as this? Who knows if God has placed you where you're at for such a time as this? If we believe that God sees something in us that he wants to use to change the world, if we've prepared by listening to God's voice and we're ready to go out, then at some point we have to just go and do what he has called us to do for such a time as this. For Esther, that meant saving her family, her people from genocide. What God has called you to do might not be so dramatic, but it could still be impactful. Maybe for such a time as this, God has placed you in your neighborhood to be a catalyst for community, to bring families together, to share a meal, to play in front yards. Maybe God has placed you for such a time as this at your job, where you can be a light, where you can be an encouragement, where you can gather people together to share a meal and get to know each other better. Maybe for such a time as this, you are just right where you're supposed to be with your family, with your kids, raising children who are full of compassion and empathy and a heart and a desire to see people loved well. For such a time as this, where has God placed you? Because God sees in us, God sees in you someone who can do what only you can do. Ephesians 2:10 says, "We are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he prepared in advance for us to do." You have been created to do a good work for God's kingdom in this world. And you know what? That work has already been prepared in advance. It is there for the taking. It is there for the fulfilling. God has created us to do good works, which only we can do. God has created you to do something in your world, in your neighborhood, in your community, in your family, in your place of business. God has created you to do something that only you can do. God sees that in you. We need to see it in ourselves. Then we just need to do what God has called us to do. Thank you for joining us. We'll be together this weekend, finishing off this series. Really excited about that. Have a great day.